Now let's talk about America's friends across the pond. I'm talking about Europe, specifically France. It has a problem with NATO's plans for the Indo-Pacific. The military alliance wants to open an office in Japan. It will be NATO's first outpost in the region. President Emmanuel Macron has a problem with that. He thinks NATO shouldn't go ahead. I have Macron's statement. Listen to what he said. If we push NATO to enlarge the spectrum and the geography, we will make a big mistake. He calls the move to expand a mistake. But why? Macron thinks by expanding NATO will lose its focus. Now this is a problem. If NATO wants an office in Japan, it just cannot go ahead and build one. An expansion like that needs to be put through a vote. The proposal will go to the North Atlantic Council, the highest decision-making body of NATO. All NATO members are represented there. They'll vote on this proposal and their verdict needs to be unanimous. Only then will NATO be able to open an office in Japan. So France will be a stumbling block. Is this proposal unprecedented? Not at all. NATO has a dozen more liaison offices or delegations. They're spread out across the world. There's one in Ukraine too, a country in the middle of a conflict. Most of these offices are small. They help in maintaining ties with the host country's military and government. NATO hasn't formally announced this, but reports say NATO wants something similar in Japan, a small office, one that can help the military alliance stay in touch with Tokyo. The idea is not a new one. NATO and Japan have been considering this since 2007. Now in 2018, Tokyo opened an office in Brussels. Brussels hosts the NATO headquarters. The war in Ukraine has led to deeper ties. Last year, Fumio Kishida was invited for the NATO summit. This year's summit is scheduled for July. Lithuania is hosting the event and the Japanese Prime Minister is invited again. Now earlier this year, the NATO chief was in Tokyo. He had hailed Japan's decision to spend more on its military.
I also told him that I strongly welcome Japan's historic new national security strategy. And I'm glad that Japan is planning to reach the NATO benchmark of 2% of GDP devoted to defense. This demonstrates that Japan takes international security seriously. It makes you an even more powerful partner for peace.
So both sides like each other. Then why is Macron opposed? Maybe because he doesn't want to anger China. Macron is trying to court Beijing. Earlier this year, he traveled to China. It was a high-profile visit. Beijing left no stone unturned for this. It went all out to make Macron feel welcomed. The French president, too, did not disappoint the Chinese. He made all the right noises. In China, Macron spoke out about the Taiwan issue and the larger fight between the US and China. The French president said that Europe should stay away from this conflict. He also thinks the region should not snap economic ties with Beijing. Listen in.
We must not be naive. Our European Union, taking this step of European sovereignty that I defended 5 years ago, is establishing trade defense instruments that are necessary for our credibility. But the European Union must also be voluntarily committed to continuing to have a trade relationship with China.
Well, that sounded a lot like appeasement. US and its allies too saw it that way. They were not happy with Macron's outreach. But the criticism has not affected Macron much. It seems he's still on the same path. That's why perhaps he's pushing NATO to stay away from the Indo-Pacific. But other NATO members have different thoughts. They're deepening their ties with the region. Consider what's happening in New Delhi this week. Defense ministers of leading NATO nations are visiting India. Yesterday, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was here. He spoke out about NATO's plans for the region.
We are absolutely not trying to establish a NATO in the Indo-Pacific. We continue to work with like-minded countries to ensure that the region remains free and open.
Today, the German defense minister was in New Delhi. There's talk of a submarine deal. Reports say Germany wants to build submarines in India. So one way or another, NATO members are taking more interest in the region. Obviously, regional players like India will set the terms of engagement, but more cooperation is inevitable, whether Macron likes it or not. Speaking of Republican candidates, there's trouble brewing for another one. Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, he's being threatened with kidnapping charges. And guess who's behind this threat? California Governor Gavin Newsom. At the heart of this controversy is the issue of migration. DeSantis is anti-migration. If left to him, he would shut the southern US border. To make that point, he has adopted a cruel tactic. He has used private jets to drop migrants in democratic states and cities. He doesn't tell the migrants, he just drops them off. But now, California is pushing back. Does this mean trouble for Ron DeSantis? And just how big is the migrant issue? Our next report tells you.
It's the battle of the governors. Republican Ron DeSantis on one side, Democrat Gavin Newsom on the other. And stuck in the middle are migrants. People from Latin America chasing the American dream. The battle was brewing for a while, but now it's out in the open. Newsom, the governor of California, tweeted this on Monday. Ron DeSantis, you small, pathetic man. This isn't Martha's Vineyard. Kidnapping charges? Before going further, let's get you the backstory. In the last few days, private jets have been dropping migrants in California. The first flight was on Friday. 16 migrants from Colombia and Venezuela landed in Sacramento. The second flight was on Monday. This time, 20 migrants were dropped.
We had no idea that they were coming, but my staff quickly found some of our community folks who work with the immigrant community.
Two questions arise. Where did these migrants board the flight? And who organized them? The first question's answer seems to be Texas. A lot of migrants cross over to the US via Texas. Once there, they seek asylum. The second question is more complicated. Who organized the flight? The migrants carried papers that say Florida was involved. Now, Florida's governor is Ron DeSantis. He's a hardline Republican. He's tough on migration as well. So the belief is DeSantis organized these flights. He used taxpayers' money to charter a plane. It's a cruel joke at the expense of desperate migrants. They had no idea what was happening to them. They were told to board a flight, so they did. And this isn't the first time. DeSantis has done this before. Last year, he flew 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard. It's an affluent liberal island in Massachusetts. Even then, questions were raised. Questions that have popped up again. Gavin Newsom is hinting at kidnapping charges. He says DeSantis is practicing state-sanctioned kidnapping. The next step is proving it. California's Attorney General is on the job. If he can prove that Florida organized the flights, it could mean trouble for DeSantis. But that's just one part of the problem. The larger story is the politicization of migration. It's a highly divisive issue. Republicans accuse Joe Biden of creating a border crisis. They say a migrant tsunami is heading to the US. How big is this tsunami? Tens of thousands of migrants do travel to the US border. Most of them apply for asylum. But numbers aren't the real problem here. Race is. Republican migration policy is pinned on xenophobia. Having said that, Biden isn't exactly faultless. His policies have created a bottleneck at the border. Around 60,000 migrants are waiting in line. Their living conditions are abysmal. It's easy for US leaders to play politics with migrants, but their policies contributed to this. Successive US governments plotted coups in Latin America. They funded drug wars and interventions. The migrants are fleeing the instability caused in some part by the US, so turning them away is not an option. But neither is flying them to California without permission.
Now let's talk about football. In Saudi Arabia, Riyadh is betting big on football. The kingdom wants to become a major football hub, and it's been taking a lot of steps in that direction. The latest news is that some clubs will be privatized. This includes big names like this year's top three: Al Ittihad, Al Nassr and Al Hilal. You may know Al Nassr as the club of Portuguese superstar Cristiano Ronaldo. The other clubs are looking to attract top players too. France striker Karim Benzema is on his way to champions Al Ittihad. Al Hilal is desperately trying to woo Argentine legend Lionel Messi. The clubs have been offering extremely lucrative contracts to entice players. All this as part of the Saudi government's Vision 2030. Here's more.
Next season, Saudi Arabian football is getting a new star. French striker Karim Benzema. He's going to ply his trade at Al Ittihad, the current champions of the Saudi Pro League. Benzema will take the field against his former Real Madrid teammate Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo also plays in the Saudi Pro League for the club Al Nassr. He captained the side to a second-place finish in the recently concluded season. But Benzema versus Ronaldo might not be the most exciting prospect next season. There's a possibility of football's greatest rivalry reigniting on Saudi soil. Cristiano Ronaldo versus Lionel Messi. That's right, the Argentine legend may also make his way to Saudi Arabia. He's aggressively being courted by last season's third-ranked club, Al Hilal. And by aggressively, we mean Al Hilal is prepared to break the bank. The latest reports say the Riyadh-based club has offered almost $1.3 billion. $1.3 billion. This is for a 2-year contract. That still means Messi could make over $500 million a year in the Saudi Pro League. His pay would eclipse Ronaldo's, who reportedly makes about $260 million a year. The Portuguese frontman is currently the highest-paid footballer in the world. And if Messi accepts Al Hilal's reported offer, he'll leave Ronaldo far behind. But Ronaldo may not mind. He's been pitching the SPL for a while now.
If they're coming big players, big names, young players, old players, they are very welcome, because if that happens, the league will improve.
Ronaldo has even talked up the future of the league, how it's heading from humble beginnings towards big things.
To speak about the league, I think the league is very good, but I think we have many opportunities to still grow. And in my opinion, if they continue to do it, the work that they want to do it for the next 5 years, I think the Saudi league can be in the 5th in the world.
He says the Saudi League can be the 5th best league in the world. That's ambitious, but it's what the country is aiming to do, or rather what Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is trying to do. The Saudi Crown Prince has a vision, Vision 2030. He wants to diversify the Saudi economy by the end of this decade. From investing in information technology to services, MBS wants to create a vibrant economy, one not solely dependent on oil, and sports is a big part of that vision. Saudi Arabia has invested in Formula One and golf as well, but the biggest sport around the world is football. So now Riyadh is focusing on the beautiful game. Attracting players with absurd pay packages is just one strategy. There's also privatization. Multiple clubs, including last season's top 3, are getting privatized. As the first step, they've been taken over by Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. It's called the Public Investment Fund. This allows companies and development agencies to invest in and take over the clubs. Once this happens, the clubs are expected to start bringing in money. Riyadh's aim is for the Saudi Pro League's revenue to quadruple by 2030. The goal is for the SPL to make $480 million annually. That's less than what Messi would reportedly make alone. Which proves it isn't about making the SPL profitable, just competitive. The plan seems to be, once these legends retire from Saudi Arabia, they'll leave behind a globally competitive football ecosystem, one that'll eventually, years later, become a pillar of the Saudi economy.
The alarm bells are ringing again. Another corporate giant in China is in trouble, the Wanda Group. You may not have heard about it, but this is not just any other company. It is a major multinational, a powerhouse in the Chinese business world, and a symbol of China's rise as an economic power. The Wanda Group is everywhere, from the skyline of China to Hollywood, even in sports. The company is a big name in Chinese real estate. It owns film studios in Hollywood. It even has investments in European football. The Wanda Group's impact is far-reaching. It is owned by Wang Jianling. He used to be China's richest man. Today, his business empire is now under trouble. There has been a dramatic shift in fortunes of Wanda. This year, Wanda was planning an IPO. Its lucrative property management subsidiary was going public. Suddenly in April, those plans were called off. Wanda made an announcement. It said they won't be able to go ahead with the IPO. This has put Wanda in a tricky spot. You see, investors had already signed up for the IPO. If they don't go ahead, they'll have to return $5.6 billion. What's the problem here? Well, the group doesn't have any money. As of March, Wanda just had almost $4 billion in cash. In the next 12 months, it has to pay $3 billion. This is debt that needs to be repaid. The problem snowballs from here. Wanda needs cash. It needs to raise money quickly. But some disturbing reports emerged in May. Wanda entered into a dialogue with major banks. Apparently, the company needs a loan relief plan, one that allows them to extend repayments, an extension of sorts to pay back loans. Now, this happened in early May. Reports say Wanda later denied these claims, but more troubling headlines have emerged in recent days, like this one. Wanda is looking to sell its assets. 20 malls in wealthy parts of China could be up for sale. They are in cities like Shanghai, Jiangsu, and even Zhejiang. The asking price for each mall, around $99 million. That's not all. Wanda has a payments unit. That too could be up for sale. The company could sell its digital payments license. It could be priced around $141 million. But the license could go for lower. Some prospective buyers are looking to negotiate. There's turmoil within the company too. Now, some business units are being downsized and staff is also being laid off. Basically, there is trouble everywhere, pending dues, shortage of cash, assets on sale, and the decision to scale back. These are classic signs of a company in distress. Wanda is clearly in trouble. Even the ratings agencies agree. Fitch Ratings has downgraded Wanda. They have a negative view of this company now. Wanda Group faces tough times ahead because Beijing is tightening the screws. China is pushing for more oversight on the real estate sector. That's bad news for Wanda because real estate is its core business. The sector is witnessing defaults again. Recently, KWG Group Holdings defaulted on one of its payments. It put out a statement about this default. The company blamed the local policymakers. I have that statement with me. Listen to this. Due to the requirement of local government policies, most of the money is under strict pre-sale cash escrow at designated bank accounts in order to ensure completion of the properties under development. So what does that mean? Basically, the company is saying it has a cash problem. The money is lying in an account and due to the strict rules, they cannot use it. That has been the story of Chinese corporates in recent years, especially in real estate. First, companies took on immense debt to grow. Later, these debts became too big to handle. Companies started to default. Then came the Communist Party crackdown. Instead of making things easier, government policies only made the situation worse. Wanda Group seems to be the latest victim of this. It remains to be seen if it will survive. Have you heard of a phenomenon called lying flat? It's a recent trend among the Chinese youth. People are so flat out tired of working that they just lie down on a couch, on grass, frankly anywhere. And they simply lie there doing nothing. They actively chalk out time to be idle. Because in China, idleness is a form of rebellion, a way to push back against the damaging and inescapable burnout culture, where people work long hours, brave endless competition, and push their bodies to the breaking point. Because this is the reality of work culture in China. This is a Chinese woman traveling on a Shanghai subway with an intravenous or IV drip inserted in her hand. She's holding a bottle of fluid over her head on the way to work. Why? Because she's unwell. but she can't take a day off, much like many other workers in China. And they are all exhausted. Why won't they be? There's record unemployment in China. 1 in 5 young people in Chinese cities are out of work. The job market is shrinking, pay scale is falling. So people who are employed are fiercely holding on to their jobs, doing their best to stay on board no matter what. The result? A difficult work commute with a banana bag over the head and a needle in the arm. It is safe to say that China's work culture is toxic. The irony is, it's not without a fan following. Remember when Chinese tech tycoon Jack Ma famously called the 996 a blessing? 996 is their so-called work culture, where people work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Employers have enforced this across sectors for the longest time. In 2021, Chinese authorities took action against the 996. They issued a stern reminder to companies, saying that such punishing work schedules are illegal. It was China's clearest warning against the toxic culture of overwork. Yet, the situation remains grim. According to China's labor laws, a standard workday is 8 hours, with a maximum of 44 hours a week. Any work beyond that requires extra pay for overtime. But this has not been well enforced. In fact, in many of the country's biggest firms, employees aren't compensated for working overtime. The government takes a hands-off approach, and a culture of overwork thrives, all while oozing toxicity, which is inextricably tied to the New Age narrative of hustle culture. It promotes the idea that there's always more to strive for, more money to make, a bigger title to chase, or a supposed higher ceiling to break. So working bees must do more, be more, and never say never. But don't be mistaken, this unhealthy culture is not limited to China. Studies show that workers around the world put in an average of 9.2 hours of unpaid overtime per week. Gambia, Mongolia, Maldives, Qatar, and India are some of the most overworked countries in the world. Here, work weeks stretch up to over 48 hours. South Koreans work an average of over 1,900 hours a year. That's nearly 200 more than the OECD average. Meanwhile, neighboring Japan averaged over 1,600 hours. Both these countries are notorious for their tough work culture. So much so, death by overwork is widely reported phenomenon here. Yes, people are literally working themselves to death. And if not death, then adverse lifelong health problems like body aches, stroke, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, anxiety, and even depression. Work cultures view people as replaceable machine parts who toil in a dehumanized workplace. And yet, we continue to rise and grind, move fast and break things and hustle harder. We unknowingly join the cult of overwork, only for it to be a fast track to burnout and sometimes even death. Work till you drop has become our life motto, but it's time to change that. We need to lift our nose from the grindstone and take a long, hard look at our sweatshop, where glorification of overwork hails supreme, and we are told our work is our worth. Overwork may be the price we pay for success, but at what cost? And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Canada, wildfires are burning in the province of British Columbia. Officials say Canada is on track to witness its worst wildfire season. In Greece, divers are trying to pull out what they call ghost nets from the depths of the Aegean Sea. Thousands of fish have died because of these nets. And in Argentina, a football match turned into a display of fireworks in its final moments. This left the commentators and the audience stunned. And finally, what makes June 6th significant? We're taking you back in history. Today, India marks the 39th anniversary of the Operation Blue Star. On this day in 1984, the Operation Blue Star was carried out to eliminate militants who had taken shelter in the Golden Temple. This happened in the Indian state of Punjab. The operation was ordered by India's then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. She was assassinated later in 1984. We leave you with this. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.
No, no se puede creer lo que está ocurriendo ahora en el estadio. No, no se puede creer. Bienvenidos a la Primera Nacional del fútbol argentino, señores.
Pero no terminó.
Y se viene el Deportivo Maipú. Y este es Herrera. 30 segundos finales, centro al área. Le va a quedar la pelota a Paredes. Este es Paredes. ¡Vamos, señores! ¡Ha ganado al Deportivo Maipú aquí en Mendoza! ¡Extraordinaria fiesta!